everybody, and welcome to the Week in Review, where we have a quick, unscripted chat about some of the main bits of news that have landed over the week. This week we're going to jump straight into it with the biggest bit of news first up, and that is that Sony is preparing to end support on the PlayStation 3, Vita and PSP in terms of the online platform. You won't be able to buy, download new games off it once it takes those servers offline. We all knew that was going to come at some point. They do eventually end the servers of these older legacy consoles. Nintendo's done it a couple of times with its own consoles, of course. But it does speak to an issue that has been ongoing, and the industry seems to have very little interest in actually dealing with it. And it's the topic of archiving. Unless a game can be repackaged up as something that can be released on new consoles, all shiny and new, and get a lot of extra money for the developer or publisher, they have no interest in preserving these games. And that means when companies go bankrupt, it's very unlikely that you're going to see those games again. When companies get acquired, it means that certain games that no longer fit in the strategy of the new parent company just disappear. And when these consoles then get taken offline, that's it. The game is gone. The only way then to experience it is to start delving into emulation and watch whatever, which of course the industry actively tries to prevent and tries to take down whenever they encounter it. So we are in this stage where we are losing a lot of games already, but losing PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, PlayStation Portable games, that's another level up entirely. There's an awful lot of games that are of incredible art value that we are at great risk of losing because Sony doesn't see value in preserving these games. And that is because Sony is a company that is behaving like a corporate rather than a company that has any investment in the arts. Next up, we have a fun little story regarding Pikmin, and I think just about anybody who has ever enjoyed one of Nintendo's Pikmin games will get a kick out of this. Everybody remembers how much of a hit Pokemon Go was. That was the AR-enhanced mobile game by developer Niantic, where you would go out into the real world looking for Pokemon to catch through the camera on your phone, and then taking those Pokemon physically to gym locations that were placed around the real-world map. It was tied into Google Maps, I believe, and that was basically the experience, and it really did resonate. It was one of those rare games to make mass media, mainstream media coverage. It was pulling in a ridiculous amount of money at one stage, and everybody was playing Pokemon Go. Nintendo is working with Niantic again, this time to make a Pikmin AR game. So much like Pokemon Go, you will be encouraged to go out into the real world, but this time you'll be looking for Pikmin, and we're not quite sure about the gameplay details yet, but we do know that the game is coming this year. Nintendo has put out a tweet confirming as much, and you can go and pre-register for it now. I think this is going to work. I don't know how it's going to play. It can't be the same as Pokemon because Pokemon was about collecting a specific few number of monsters, whereas Pikmin's about gathering a horde of them and then using them to overcome obstacles. They can't physically put obstacles in the real world to stop you from making progress, so I'm not sure how it's going to gel with the Pikmin thing. But Pikmin really is, at its core, a game about wanderlust and exploring and the journey and seeing these kinds of exotic things. And an AR-enhanced game is certainly a very good way of encouraging people to get outside and go places that they might not otherwise go. Now, I don't think it's going to be as big as Pokemon Go because Pikmin is a much smaller franchise, but I do think that this one has a lot of potential to be a very good game and find itself a very strong core audience. Next up, we have some movie news. So Sony had a massive hit with Ghost of Tsushima last year. It won a bunch of awards, it got all kinds of positive write-ups from the critics, and a lot of players really loved it as well. A lot of people talked about it for a long time after it was released, and still talk about it now. Because it was so popular, Sony has decided to turn it into a film, and they've tapped director Chad Stahelski, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Chad Stahelski, who was the director of the last couple of John Wick films, to direct it. Now, I'm sure on that basis alone, the film is going to be an incredible action film. Chad is a very good action director. John Wick 3 in particular, I've seen that film about 5 or 6 times already. I love it because it is so visceral with its action. It's so fast-paced, and it is so technical in terms of its choreography and the flowing movements and all of that. That scene in the end of John Wick 3 where he's doing the tower thing, the kind of reference back to Bruce Lee's film, that was a masterpiece of action cinema. So they found the right director in the sense that he knows what he's doing and he will fit the kind of experience that Ghost of Tsushima offered. But I do have to point out that the Japanese film industry is big, has many very good directors, including many very good action film directors. Just a couple of weeks ago on this kind of segment that I do, I mentioned there's a new Rurouni Kenshin film coming. If you watch the Rurouni Kenshin films, they are all excellent action films about samurai, effectively, although it's placed a little bit later on, but effectively it's about sword fights and things like that. So Japan already has the infrastructure to do this. Why they felt the need to get an American director to do a film about Japan when they had all the resources? They could have just gone to the Japanese film industry and got them to do it. I just have issues with this. It's like, we don't need to have the American spin on every single story. They've already done the game, and the game was certainly very successful and all that kind of stuff. Why not give that story to the Japanese to see what they do with it now? I find it very frustrating that there's this American centricity about everything that Sony's doing at the moment, and it's even now applying to the films that they make about games in Japan when they have this massive Japanese film industry that they could have used instead. Okay, so next up I am going to talk about something that is Australian-centric, but as an Australian it is important to me, and it does go to a broader discussion that I'll touch on later on. A game's been banned in Australia, Disco Elysium, which is a game that a few people will recognise, I'm sure. It's a very well-regarded game, was released on PC not long ago. It has a console version coming, or the console version might actually be out in some places in the world, I don't know, because it's been banned in Australia. The PC version, for whatever reason, is still there, as far as I know, but I'm a console gamer and I was looking forward to playing this on console because that is how I prefer to play my games. Everything I've heard about Disco Elysium suggests that it is something that I would have really liked to play because it is a non-combat focused RPG, and Planescape Torment is one of my favourite games of all time. And also I'd heard the themes that Disco Elysium explores, other kinds of themes that I find interesting and would like to play, experience and think about. It was an art game, effectively, and I do like my art games, as everybody knows. But now I either have to deal with the PC version, which is less than ideal and not my way of playing games, or I have to go through all the effort to do VPNs and all that nonsense to try and get the game from overseas onto my Australian consoles. But the point here is, we talk about censorship a lot in video games, particularly with regards to anime games. If a character has their boobs reduced in size, if there's a bit of lighting to hide a piece of their body from the Western release, if the translator changes a couple of words in a way that people don't agree with, we have this massive debate, it blow up every time, about how they've been censored, how the art has been censored. But no, this is what censorship actually looks like. This is not commercial decisions being made to make a product more viable for a market. This is a government agency taking decisions away from consumers and companies and effectively refusing to allow us to have the conversation about this game. We can't critique it, because we can't play it. We can't discuss its themes because we can't play it. We are effectively silenced on this game because of the Australian government, and it's really important that we understand what is and isn't censorship. It's really important that when we see actual censorship, we recognise it as such, because in trying to lump everything together into this kind of conversation about censorship, all the anime stuff and all that, it just undermines the conversation about the actual censorship that is a very big problem in this industry in Australia. And yeah, it's very disappointing that I will not be able to play Disco Elysium on top of everything else. So last this week we have another Australian story, but this one is so surreal that I think you're going to get a kick out of it. There is an organisation in Australia called the Fair Work Commission, and they are a good guy organisation. They are really there, as the name suggests, to make sure that there isn't cases of unfair dismissal happening, that people feel safe in the workforce, that health and safety regulations are followed through, that there isn't bullying and sexual harassment. They're the place to go if you feel like you're having a hard time at work, basically, and it is becoming a problem to your ability to do your job. Now, they've been in the news a bit over the last year because the deputy president of the organisation has in his office a cabinet which has 20 or so anime and pop culture figures in what could only be described as quite pin-up poses. They're quite sexy in nature, and it's just not what you would expect to see were you to walk into an organisation called the Fair Work Commission. Now, they've been doing an investigation into this over the past year, and this week the news came down that the organisation that did the investigation decided that these figures did not violate Australia's work health and safety laws, but they are a psychological hazard. That's the exact words they used, psychological hazard. If you have these anime figures in your presence, they are a psychological hazard. Which is amusing to me because I have about 70 Hatsune Miku figures, another 20 or so Rin figures, and Honoka from Love Live. I've got a lot of figures. I mean, it's a big collection for me, and I find it amusing, the concept that I'm surrounded by so many psychological hazards. But I guess, obviously, if I was to go into work into an office, and I'm lucky that I don't work in an office, so I don't have this issue, but if I was, I don't think I would set up a cabinet with these figures in there. Not because I have a problem with them, obviously I don't, otherwise I wouldn't buy them. They're too expensive to buy if I found them offensive in some way. But the reality is that these things probably don't belong in an office, let's face it. I think we can all agree on that. And, while it's not, I do think it's a little bit offensive that they would be categorized as a psychological hazard, I do think that this guy should probably pack up his figures and take them home. Anyway, that's enough for this video for this week. Thank you very much as always for tuning in. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, happy to hear from you and looking forward to some robust debate. Please do click that like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. That way you will catch them all as such. And if you do enjoy my work and want to support what we're doing, please consider backing me on Patreon. You can do so from just $1 a month or more. You can always do more if you want to, if you're feeling generous, but just $1 a month will be more than enough to help me to continue to grow what we're doing with this channel, and it's getting bigger and more exciting every week. So thanks everybody for joining us again. Have a great weekend, and we will see you bright and early next week.